It always starts with coffee and the illusion of control. I rolled into the office at 8:26 a.m., clutching a scalding Americano like it was the last warm thing on earth. The Boston air had that post-summer bite, the kind that makes you remember you live in a place with real seasons and even realer heating bills. My boots echoed through the marble lobby of Marlowe and Finch, the kind of marketing agency that tells clients they're changing the conversation while charging $300 an hour to brainstorm buzzwords. The receptionist, Kendra, flashed me a glossy smile. "Morning, Sloan." "Barely," I muttered, sipping caffeine like oxygen. Upstairs, our open-concept floor hummed with too bright lighting, expensive desks, and the sound of people pretending to be busy. I weaved past the interns in their pressed blazers, waving at Jules, who was already camped out at her dual monitors, half a bagel in hand. "Tell me something good," I said, slinging my bag under my desk. "You didn't step in dog crap like last Monday," she offered cheerfully. "Progress. Low bar, but I'll take it." Jules Tran was the one person in this building who didn't make me feel like I had to wear armor. She was sharp, sarcastic, and had a sixth sense for BS. I'd met her 3 years ago when she transferred from the LA office, and we'd clicked instantly, like two women who both knew exactly how much harder we had to work to get half the credit. I pulled up my calendar. The words, strategy sync, 9 a.m., Clara R., blinked back at me like a curse. "Oh, joy," I sighed. Jules raised an eyebrow. "Strategy sync or emotional beatdown?" "Why not both?" Clara Rowe, VP of Strategy, was the woman you were supposed to want to be. Tall, ageless, sleek suits and sleeker smiles. She was the first person who took me under her wing when I joined 6 years ago. Back then, I thought she was a mentor. Now, I wasn't sure she even saw me as a human. "Maybe she's finally giving you that luxury skincare client," Jules said, chewing thoughtfully. I laughed. "More likely she wants me to ghostwrite another pitch so she can take credit again." "You say that like it's not company tradition." She wasn't wrong. At 8:58, I grabbed my laptop and made the short walk to Clara's corner office, all glass and gold accents. She didn't look up when I entered. "Close the door," she said, flipping through a folder. I obeyed, sitting across from her. The air smelled like Joe Malone and tension. "I need a deck for the Tritech account by Thursday," she said briskly. "High-level strategy, ROI projections, something that feels both aggressive and elegant." "Do we have updated campaign goals from their CMO?" Clara waved her hand. "I'll get them to you. Just start shaping the narrative. Big picture. We need to make them feel like we already know where they're going." I nodded. I could build the deck in my sleep. I probably had, or close to it. "I've already blocked time on your calendar this week," Clara added, still not looking at me. "Try to keep the rest clear." Of course. There was a time when meetings with Clara left me energized, hungry to prove myself. Now they just left me cold. Back at my desk, Jules leaned over. "Well?" "She wants a deck." "I'm her hands." Again. Jules frowned. "She ever thank you?" I smiled bitterly. "Clara doesn't say thank you. She says, make this tighter." The rest of the day bled out in meetings, emails, and half-eaten protein bars. Around 4:15, I ducked into the tiny break room for tea and caught a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. "I mean, Clara's practically running the Tritech pitch herself," someone said, a junior account exec, whispering to another guy. "She's a beast. Did you see that mock-up deck? Killer." My blood ran a little cold. I hadn't sent Clara the deck yet. "I finished it last night. Saved it. Never shared it." "So how did they already know what it looked like?" I walked slowly back to my desk, every step a little heavier. I opened my laptop, pulled up the file, still unsent. Then I checked the version history. Someone had accessed it at 1:13 a.m. My stomach dropped. Clara had my login. From that offsite 2 months ago, when IT reset my password and she helped me get in. I never changed it back. She'd gone in while I slept. Pulled the deck. And presented it like her own. It wasn't just a one-time thing. It was a pattern. My late nights. Her early morning inspirations. And suddenly, all those weird overlaps started to make sense. The clients praising her for language I wrote. The CEO spotlighting her during town halls. I sat frozen in my chair, fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Hey," Jules said quietly. "You okay?" I turned to her, my voice flat. She took it. Jules blinked. "Wait, the deck." She went into my drive and downloaded it. Probably presented it this morning. Jules leaned in, eyes narrowing. "Are you serious?" I nodded. "She's been doing this for months. I just didn't want to see it." A beat passed. Jules reached over, closed my laptop gently. "You know what this means, right? That I'm a gullible idiot?" She shook her head. "That it's time to stop playing nice." I stared at her for a long second. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something sharp click into place. Not anger. Not yet. But the beginning of a plan. There are moments you remember not because of what was said, but because of what you didn't say. The next morning, Clara floated into the Monday leadership meeting like she'd just invented caffeine and power blazers. Everyone was already seated in the glass-walled conference room, sunlight glaring off the whiteboard, the smell of burnt coffee lingering in the air like bad news. I sat in my usual spot across the table, next to Jules and diagonally from Clara. She didn't look at me. She never looked at me when she was about to pull something. Matt, our CEO, was tapping his fingers on the table, impatient as always. "All right, let's dive in. Clara, you're up." She stood, smooth and poised, clicked her remote, and my stomach turned. Slide 1, the Tritech logo. Slide 2, Next-Gen Positioning Strategy, grounded, scalable, human. My words. My deck. Even the tagline, human, not hype, a line I'd wrestled with for hours on Sunday night, was there in Helvetica bold, perfectly centered on slide 4. I glanced around the room. Heads nodded, pens moved. Matt leaned in. "This is excellent," he said. "Exactly the direction we need to go." Clara smiled. "Thank you. I wanted to get ahead of the curve. I started sketching this out over the weekend." Bull. Absolute, well-manicured bull. I kept my face blank, but Jules shot me a sideways glance so sharp I nearly flinched. Clara was halfway through the canned A when Matt said the words that sealed it. "Clara, I think we should loop you in as the lead for the Tritech presentation in October." My ears buzzed. October meant money. Visibility. Recognition. It meant standing on stage in front of the client's C-suite and the entire company. Clara nodded humbly, the picture of composure. "Happy to take it on." I could feel my fingernails digging into my palm. I forced a smile. "Great idea." She finally looked at me, and that look was the most polite knife I'd ever seen. After the meeting, I followed her down the hall. "Clara," I said, keeping my voice even. "Can we talk?" She turned, sipping her coffee. "Of course. In private." She led me into her office, closed the door. I didn't waste time. "You pulled my deck. Sunday night. 1:13 a.m. From my drive." Her expression didn't change. "Excuse me?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about." She blinked, slowly. "Sloan, that deck was barely a framework. I added a significant amount of value." I stared at her. You presented it like it was your idea. Clara stepped around her desk and sat, perfectly calm. We're a team. And part of working here, especially at your level, is understanding that senior leadership guides the narrative. I built the narrative, I snapped. And you'll build others, she said, voice soft. This isn't about credit, Sloan. It's about trust. We're shaping client success. The spotlight doesn't always land where we want it to. My mouth was dry. You stole it. She stood, cool and dismissive. You're emotional. I understand. But if you'd like to have a real conversation, let me know when you've cooled off. I opened my mouth, and closed it again. And walked out. In the hallway, Jules caught up with me. What happened? She told me I was emotional. Ugh. Classic, don't make this about you, move. I'm going to make it about me, I said. Good. About damn time. That night, I didn't go straight home. I walked the long way to the public garden, let the wind rip through my coat, and sat on a cold bench staring at the ducks. I needed to think. Clara wasn't sloppy. She was calculated. A slow operator. Not just stealing, grooming me into silence. Each theft more subtle than the last. By the time I noticed, she already had my work in her mouth like it belonged there. But now I knew. And I wasn't going to let it happen again. At home, I opened a blank document. File name, list. On it, I wrote every date, every project, every comment that felt off. Times she'd asked for access to my drafts. Times she'd changed deadlines after I submitted something, then presented it early. Every breadcrumb I'd ignored. Then I dug into our internal drive logs. I didn't know much about metadata, but I knew enough to pull timestamps, cross-reference them with my file edits, and start a timeline. My hands shook as I worked. Not because I was scared. Because I was done being silent. Halfway through, I messaged Jordan, the junior analyst with a knack for tech. Hey, weird Q, do you know how to pull detailed access logs for shared folders? Jordan, for you. Always. Who we outing? I smiled. Just like that, I wasn't alone anymore. I wasn't crazy. That mattered more to me than I wanted to admit. When you work under someone like Clara, doubt becomes part of your diet. You start second-guessing yourself before anyone else gets the chance. But seeing the timestamps in Jordan's spreadsheet, line after line showing her logging into my drafts at ungodly hours, it was like the fog lifted. I don't want to know what you're planning, Jordan said as he handed me the USB stick in the stairwell. But if this ever comes back to me, I'll deny everything. I smirked. You're a ghost. He nodded once, shoved his hands in his hoodie pocket, and disappeared back down the stairs like a scene from some corporate noir film. Now I had proof. But proof didn't mean power. Not yet. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. Clara didn't call me into any meetings. She didn't ask for updates. She barely made eye contact in hallways. At first, I thought she was spooked. Then I realized, she was cutting me out. And no one else seemed to notice. It's funny how fast you disappear when someone higher up decides you're inconvenient. On Wednesday, I walked into a brainstorming session for the new tech incubator client. My name was on the invite. I'd spent 3 nights compiling research. There were 6 people already in the room. My seat wasn't there. Hey, I said, trying to sound casual, I think I'm supposed to be part of this. Clara looked up from her iPad without smiling. We shifted direction. More product heavy, less storytelling. I thought it made sense to streamline. But I did the consumer breakdown. We're good, she said, cutting me off. Thanks though. My face burned. I nodded stiffly and walked out, catching Jules's sympathetic look from across the room. I didn't cry. But later, alone in the fourth-floor bathroom stall, I came close. Back at my desk, Jules brought me a blueberry muffin and a post-it that read, "You are not invisible." She's just threatened. I ate half the muffin in silence before I spoke. She's trying to get me to quit. Yeah, Jules said softly. She is. What if she wins? Jules sat back. What if she doesn't? That night, I added to the list. This time, I included names, witnesses. People who'd seen me hand over outlines. People who'd been in the room when Clara rephrased things I just said. I needed something bigger than metadata. I needed a moment. A stage. The fall pitch review was 2 weeks away. Every lead strategist had to present one marquee campaign to the exec board and major clients, in front of the entire company. And Clara had been slated to pitch Tritech. Correction, my pitch. The next morning, I bumped into Nate Delgado by the elevators. CTO. Quiet, thoughtful, observant. We'd worked on 2 cross-departmental tech briefs earlier this year. I liked him, but not in the way people think when women and men talk. I liked that he noticed things. Remembered details. Hey, he said. Haven't seen you around the war room lately. I smiled thinly. Got benched. He raised an eyebrow. Strategic benching? I shrugged. Let's just say I'm being given space to reflect. Well, he said, pressing the elevator button, if you ever need a second opinion on anything, strategy-related, you know where to find me. I hesitated. Then nodded. Actually, I might take you up on that. That weekend, I didn't go out. I didn't rest. I built a deck. A better deck. I knew Tritech's weaknesses, their data pain points, their leadership egos. I knew how to speak directly to them, not with jargon, but with clarity. Clara's version of the pitch was sleek, sure. But mine would land. I worked until my eyes ached. Rehearsed in front of the mirror until I hated the sound of my own voice. I even tried on the blazer I'd bought last year for future big moments and never worn. I was getting ready. Even if no one knew it yet. Especially Clara. The problem with gut instincts is that they're easy to dismiss. Especially when someone like Clara is involved. She wrapped every betrayal in silk and plausible deniability. But I'd had enough. Monday morning, I showed up early and armed. I wasn't just tracking my thoughts anymore, I was hunting patterns. You're here early, Jules said, blinking at me from behind her laptop. I couldn't sleep, I said, sliding into my chair. And I have a research project. She raised an eyebrow. You mean revenge? I smiled. Same difference. I opened a new tab and logged into our internal workspace. Clara had pulled my deck at 1:13 a.m., that I knew. But what about the other times I'd felt something off? I pulled every shared file I'd worked on over the last 6 months. I cross-referenced timestamps, version histories, and access logs. It was tedious, and half the time I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. But then, there it was. Zeto's campaign, draft created, May 9, 11:48 p.m., accessed by Crow, the next morning at 2:36 a.m., Daltro Labs deck, final outline saved, June 14, 10:22 p.m., presented to the client June 16, with zero mention of my name. The same pattern, over and over. She doesn't even do her own dirty work, I muttered. What's that? Jules asked. She waits until I'm done, logs in when she knows I'm not looking, and presents it like she dreamed it up in the shower. Jules whistled low. You got timestamps? Oh yeah. I started a spreadsheet. Labeled it, receipts. Want me to make a pie chart? She asked. Title it, Percentage of Credit Clara Deserved. I laughed, then froze. An idea struck. Actually, could you pull the Slack export from the Daltro campaign week? I could, she said slowly, if I were, say, ethically compelled to help expose some managerial theft. You're the best person I know. I get that a lot, she said, typing furiously. By noon, we had it. Clara had posted my phrasing, a line about designing for human friction, in a strategy Slack channel at 9:08 a.m. the morning after I'd sent it to her privately. I knew it. She was harvesting my work and weaving it into her narrative before I ever had a chance to claim it. Now I had proof. Not enough for legal action, but enough to shine a spotlight in the right room. That night, I sat on the floor of my apartment, sipping cheap wine and reading old emails. Not for leads, for reminders. Like this one from Clara, after I landed a huge insight during our first client trip. Fantastic pull, Sloan. Let's keep this between us for now until I find the right moment to bring it to leadership. She never brought it up again. Or this one, from 6 months ago. I'm rephrasing a few things for the final deck. Hope that's okay, need it to reflect my voice. Her voice. It was always about her voice. I opened a new tab. Searched for TriTech board members. Then I searched for pitch review agenda on our company intranet. The deadline to register presenters was 4 days away. And I already knew what I'd submit. Not Clara's sanitized vision. Not the version she Frankensteined from my work. Mine. The original strategy. The one I'd refined while she played puppet master. I started outlining the pitch, dragging pieces from old drafts, reworking the positioning, simplifying the message. At 1:17 a.m., I sat back in my chair. My eyes burned, but I was smiling. I wasn't just building a deck. I was building the trap. I submitted my name to the pitch review list on a Thursday afternoon, 5 minutes before the deadline. No announcement. No fanfare. Just a meeting invite titled, Fall Pitch Review, TriTech, The Human Framework. Presenter, Sloan Harris. Clara wouldn't see it until Friday morning. Which gave me one blissful night to sleep, uninterrupted, and dream of nothing but well-earned chaos. You submitted your own pitch? Jules whispered the next morning, peering at the calendar from her desk like it was radioactive. I did, I said, stirring my coffee calmly. And Clara doesn't know yet? Correct. She's gonna burn this place to the ground. She's welcome to try. And try she did. At 9:04 a.m., Clara stormed past my desk like a hurricane in 4-inch heels. She didn't say a word, not until the glass door of her office swung open 2 minutes later. Sloan. My office. Now. I gave Jules a calm look and stood. Show time. Help me understand what you're doing, Clara said the moment I stepped inside. She didn't wait for me to sit. You're presenting TriTech. That was my deck. My account. I met her gaze. It was my concept. My language. My pitch. You submitted it without telling me. I didn't need your permission. Her jaw clenched. This is not how leadership behaves. I kept my face still. Neither is logging into a strategist's drafts at 1 a.m. and calling it your work. There. I said it. Out loud. Her eyes narrowed. You're accusing me of theft. I'm stating facts. I have documentation. Clara slowly lowered herself into her chair, voice now low and deliberate. Sloan. You're emotional. And reckless. Do you understand what this could do to your reputation? I took a breath, not rising to the bait. You're right, I said. I do know what it could do. That's why I'm doing it. For once, she didn't have a comeback. She just stared at me, something behind her eyes crumbling, then blinking itself away. I've helped you, she finally said. Shaped you. You used me, I corrected. And I let you. But not anymore. I turned and walked out before she could say another word. The weekend before the pitch, I went dark. No texts. No brunch. No distractions. I closed the blinds in my apartment and opened every version of the Tritech concept I'd ever worked on. I rewrote, reorganized, edited like my life depended on it. Because in a way, it did. By Sunday night, I had it, a deck that was clean, confident, and undeniably mine. But I wasn't done. I embedded metadata. Timestamps. Version logs. Even hyperlinks to source docs. All tied to my name and edits. Nothing flashy. Just enough to prove authorship, in case Clara tried to steal one last time. I uploaded it to the official portal with one final, satisfying click. Then I opened Slack and messaged Jules. Me, the blueprint is ready. Jules, architect of your own revenge. I love it. Monday morning, Clara didn't show up. Not to the stand-up. Not to her meetings. Not to anything. Her assistant said she was working remotely. Translation, scrambling. I didn't care. Let her sweat. The day before the pitch review, Matt pulled me aside after lunch. Tritech, he said, casual as always. I nodded. He studied me for a beat. Clara submitted a pitch outline 2 weeks ago. Yours is better. Thank you, I said, steady. I'm not interested in drama, he added. Neither am I. Good. Because if this goes south, it's on you. It won't. He looked at me a moment longer, then nodded once. I turned to leave, but he called out after me, Sloan. Yes? Make sure you kill it. The day of the fall pitch review, I woke up before my alarm. I stood in the mirror for 10 minutes, trying to quiet the voice in my head. The one Clara had trained, the voice that said, don't be too much. Don't push. Don't speak unless invited. Then I put on my charcoal blazer, the one I'd been saving for a promotion that never came, and told that voice to sit down and shut up. The office buzzed like a shaken soda can. Leadership presentations always pulled a crowd, but this time was different. The tension wasn't about strategy, it was about the blood in the water. Everyone knew Clara and I were circling each other. They just didn't know what I had planned. Jules met me by the elevator. Ready to cause a minor corporate earthquake? I'd settle for a tremor, I said. She smirked. That's not your style. The auditorium was already full when we walked in. Low lighting. Branded banners. Clients in the front row. Our full exec team along the aisle. And just off to the side, in a seat near the emergency exit, was Clara. Hair perfect. Legs crossed. Watching. I stepped backstage as the presentation before mine wrapped up. The moderator gave me a tight nod, then gestured toward the steps. You're up. Walking into that room felt like walking into a courtroom. Every face turned toward me. Some curious. Some skeptical. A few openly hungry for drama. But I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. I opened my deck. Slide 1, Rebuilding Trust, Tritech's Human Framework. I started slow. Calm. Confident. Not just a strategist delivering a concept, but a woman telling the story that only she could tell. I didn't use buzzwords. I didn't overpromise. I gave them clarity. Structure. Value. Then I did something that made the entire room go still. I flipped to a slide titled, The Work Behind the Work. It showed a breakdown of how this campaign was developed. Slide thumbnails. Timestamps. Draft versions. Each one labeled with my name. I didn't explain it. I let the visuals speak. Because the people in that room were smart. They understood context. The absence of Clara's name said everything. When I looked up, I saw Matt watching me with an expression I'd never seen before, part surprise, part respect. Clara, meanwhile, had gone completely still. She wasn't even pretending to smile. I closed with a line I'd kept hidden in my pocket for months. In a landscape where trust is currency, the greatest risk isn't failure, it's pretending success was never a team effort. Applause started tentatively. Then it grew. And grew. Jules was on her feet. Nate Delgado, too. Even Andre from Data clapped like someone who just watched the underdog land a knockout punch. And when I walked off that stage, I wasn't just walking away from a presentation. I was walking away from the version of myself that needed Clara's approval. Backstage, Matt caught up with me. "That was clean," he said. "Glad you think so. She's not going to be happy." "She never was," I said. He smiled, just a little. "We should talk next week. About Tritech, and where you want to take it." "I've got ideas." "I'm sure you do." That afternoon, Clara cleared out her office. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't send a final email. She just vanished. And no one really asked why. Maybe they didn't want to know. Or maybe, they already did. 3 days after the pitch, Clara was officially gone. No farewell message. No Zoom goodbye. Not even a passive-aggressive LinkedIn post. Just a line in the Friday email from HR. "Please join us in wishing Clara Rowe all the best in her future endeavors." That was it. 4 years of power plays, weaponized praise, and quiet theft, wiped out in one polite sentence. It felt almost anticlimactic. But then again, maybe that was fitting. People like Clara didn't get dragged out. They just dissolved. Disappeared behind vague terms like pursuing new opportunities or stepping away to reflect. Jules forwarded me the email with one line, "Can't believe it." Actually wait, yes I can. The next week felt oddly quiet. I didn't realize how much space Clara had occupied in my brain until she wasn't there. No surprise hallway encounters. No subtle corrections in meetings. No second-guessing my tone every time I wrote an email. It was like finally exhaling after holding my breath for months. On Tuesday, I met with Matt and the client team for a Tritech transition call. "Sloan will be leading moving forward," Matt said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. No drama. No caveats. Just fact. Tritech's VP smiled at me through the screen. "Looking forward to where you take us." That was the moment it hit me, I wasn't the backup anymore. I wasn't someone else's voice. I was mine. Later that week, Nate caught me in the hallway. "You burned it all down, huh?" he said, smiling. "Just cleared out the rot," I replied. "Well, whatever you did, it worked. I haven't seen the board this confident in a strategy since, ever." I hesitated. "Thanks for having my back." "You never needed it," he said. "But it was an honor anyway." We stood there for a second, in that weird, charged quiet where everything's been said without being said. Then I nodded. "Drinks Friday. You buying?" "I just dethroned a VP. You're buying." By the end of the week, I'd moved into Clara's old office. Same windows. Same view. But not the same energy. I didn't bring her sleek art prints or cold designer desk setup. I brought in a second chair. A coffee maker. A handwritten quote on the wall from my old grad school professor: "Strategy without empathy is just noise." I'd watched Clara run a kingdom built on control. But I wasn't building a kingdom. I was building a table, and I wanted the right people sitting at it. The day I moved in, Jules poked her head through the door. "You gonna sage this place or what?" "Already did," I said. "Twice." She dropped a cupcake on my desk. The frosting spelled HBC. "You earned that," she said. Damn right I did. Revenge didn't feel the way I thought it would. There was no confetti. No movie soundtrack swells. No dramatic confrontation in a boardroom. There was just me, standing in a quiet office, holding a mug of too strong coffee, realizing I'd finally stopped shrinking myself to make someone else feel big. And that was enough. Clara didn't reach out. Not a call. Not a text. But 2 weeks after she left, I saw her. I was walking past the lobby bar at the Four Seasons, heels clicking, head high, when I spotted her through the glass. She was alone at a corner table, sipping from a wine glass, staring blankly at the screen of a laptop that looked just a little too new. She looked up. Our eyes met. And for one long, quiet second, we just existed. Not mentor and mentee. Not thief and victim. Just two women in a city that forgets you quickly. Then she gave me a small, tight smile. Not warm. Not defeated. Just acknowledgement. And I walked on. Weeks passed. The agency moved on. No one talked about Clara anymore. Not really. A new director was brought in from Boston. People shifted seats. New clients came in. But one thing had changed for good. When I spoke in meetings now, people listened. When I proposed bold ideas, no one tried to refine my tone. And when I sent decks, they stayed mine. One afternoon, Matt called me into his office. He leaned back, folding his hands. "You've had a hell of a quarter." "Thanks," I said carefully. "The board's impressed. Triteca's extending the contract another year. And we're putting your campaign in for the Redline Awards." I blinked. "Seriously?" He nodded. "It's the strongest pitch we've run in years. You made this agency look good." A pause. "You're not just good at strategy, Sloan," he added. "You're good at reading the game. That's rare." I smiled. "I've had a hell of a teacher." He winced. "Too soon?" "Little bit." On the morning of the award submission deadline, I opened the final file one last time. There it was, every slide, every insight, every line of copy. And on the title page, in clear, bold font, Lead Strategist, Sloan Harris, Creative Contributors, Team Alpha, Strategic Development, SH. I stared at those initials for a moment. No one would ever mistake whose work this was again. Not now. Not ever. The last entry in my revenge list simply read, "They know who I am now." And with that, I closed the file, took a deep breath, and hit submit. I used to think revenge would change me. That it would make me harder, colder, more cynical. But the truth? It made me honest. It made me sharp. And above all, it made me free. Funny thing is, I didn't just win a pitch. I got my name back. And if you've ever had someone try to erase you from your own work, you know how good that feels. So, what would you have done? I'm curious. Tell me in the comments, and if this story hit you somewhere deep, like it did me, hit like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and stick around. There's more where this came from.